1995. Mike Tyson had been out of prison for 4 months. He was the most famous athlete on the planet, and he had nowhere to be at 3 in the morning. So he drove alone through Manhattan and stopped at a diner he had never been to before. The waitress who took his order recognized him immediately. She didn't say a word about it. She just brought him coffee and left him alone. When Mike got up to leave an hour later, there was a folded piece of paper under his coffee cup. What was written on it has never been reported anywhere. This is that story. The diner was called Something Ordinary, a name on a sign above a door on a street in Lower Manhattan that Mike Tyson had driven past 100 times without stopping. It was open 24 hours. The windows were lit from inside with the specific yellow warmth of places that have given up trying to be anything other than what they are. A cook visible through the pass-through window. 3 other customers, none of them together, each in their own silence. A waitress behind the counter refilling a coffee pot that did not need refilling. Mike parked the car and sat in it for a moment. It was 3:12 in the morning. He had been driving for 2 hours, not going anywhere. Just driving, the way he had learned to drive in the months since his release, using the car and the city and the movement as a way of being somewhere without having to be present in it. Manhattan at 3 a.m. accepted this. The city did not ask you where you were going or why you had nowhere to be. He got out of the car and went inside. 4 months. That was how long he had been out. 4 months since the gates of the Indiana Youth Center had opened, and the world had been waiting on the other side with cameras and microphones and the specific hunger of people who had been told a story for 3 years and wanted the next chapter. 4 months of press conferences and management meetings and the business of rebuilding a career that had been paused rather than ended, because the kind of talent Mike Tyson had does not end, it waits. But at 3:12 in the morning, in a diner on a street in Lower Manhattan, none of that was available to him as comfort. What was available was a booth by the window, a laminated menu, the sound of a coffee pot being set down on a burner, the ordinary sounds of a place that had been open all night and would be open all day and did not care what happened between those 2 things. Mike slid into the booth and looked at the menu without reading it. A woman appeared beside the table. She was in her mid-40s, the waitress, with the efficient, unhurried movement of someone who's been doing this job long enough to have made peace with every version of it. Dark hair pulled back, a pen behind her ear, the standard uniform of the place. She looked at Mike when she arrived at the table. Not quickly. Not with the careful avoidance of someone trying not to be seen looking. She just looked at him the way a person looks at another person when they arrive in front of them. She recognized him. This was not a question. There was no person in America in 1995 who would not have recognized Mike Tyson's face, and this woman, mid-40s, Manhattan, was not going to be the exception. She recognized him, and something passed across her face in the fraction of a second between recognition and decision. And then the decision was made, and what she did was this. She took out her notepad. "What can I get you?" she said. Her voice was the voice of someone taking an order. Nothing more, nothing less. No change in register, no excitement. No, the carefully managed neutrality of someone suppressing excitement. Just a woman with a notepad asking a customer what he wanted. Mike looked up at her. "Coffee," he said. "And whatever you think is good." She wrote something on the notepad. "Eggs are good," she said. "I'll bring you eggs." She left, and if you want more untold stories like this one, subscribe right now and hit the bell. We post new videos every single day. Now, to understand what that moment meant to Mike Tyson and why he would think about it for years afterward, we need to understand something about what the 4 months since his release had actually been like. People imagine that getting out of prison is a relief, and it is, in the obvious way that any ending of confinement is a relief. But there is another thing that happens when someone very famous leaves prison, which is that the world they return to has a very specific idea of who they are and what the story means and what the next chapter should look like. And that idea, that story, that chapter, it belongs to everyone who has been watching, not to the person who lived it. Mike had spent 3 years in prison reading, thinking, working on himself in the specific way that enforced solitude makes possible if you choose to use it rather than survive it. He had come out different from the person who went in, or trying to be, which is the same thing as being, but is the necessary beginning of it. But the world outside did not have space for the trying. The world outside wanted Iron Mike back, wanted the spectacle, the menace, the baddest man on the planet in his prime, ready to reclaim everything that had been paused. The world outside had a version of Mike Tyson that was very clear and very fixed and did not easily accommodate the possibility that 3 years of reading and thinking and trying might have produced something more complicated than a fighter ready to fight. So Mike drove at 3 a.m. because driving was the one thing that asked nothing of him. The road did not care who he was. The car did not have opinions about what the next chapter should look like. And on this particular night, 4 months out, still finding the shape of this new version of his life, he had stopped at a diner in Lower Manhattan, and a woman with a pen behind her ear had taken his order and not said his name. The coffee came first, black, in a heavy ceramic mug, the kind that retains heat because it weighs enough to. Mike wrapped both hands around it and felt the warmth and looked out the window at the empty street. The eggs came 8 minutes later, scrambled with toast with a small container of jam on the side that he had not asked for. The waitress set the plate down in front of him without ceremony. "You need anything else right now?" she said. "No," Mike said. "Thank you." She nodded and went back behind the counter. Mike ate slowly. He was not particularly hungry, but the food was good, in the way that simple food made competently is good, and eating gave him something to do with his hands and his attention that was not thinking. He looked at the street outside. A taxi passed. A man walked a dog. The specific sparse population of Manhattan at 3 a.m. went about its business around him. The cook said something to the waitress through the pass-through window, and she laughed quietly, the laugh of a private joke between people who have worked together long enough to have private jokes. One of the other customers, an older man in a workman's jacket, finished his meal and left money on the counter and left without speaking to anyone. Mike ordered another coffee. Before we continue, drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Mike Tyson is sitting alone in a diner at 3 a.m., 4 months out of prison, and the waitress has recognized him and said nothing about it. What do you think is written on the note she's going to leave him? Tell us before we show you. Now, back to the story. He sat for an hour. Not doing anything, by the outside measure of doing, not making calls, not planning, not preparing for anything. Just sitting with the coffee in the window and the specific restful quality of a place that required nothing from him. He could not remember the last time he had been in a public space and been required to be nothing except a person sitting in it. At 4:17 in the morning, Mike put money on the table, more than the bill, considerably more, and stood up and put on his jacket. That's when he saw it, under the coffee cup. A small piece of paper, folded once, not a napkin. A piece of paper torn from the bottom of an order pad, the kind waitresses use when they run out of the regular sheets, folded neatly, placed under the cup at some point during the hour he had been sitting there, placed so carefully that he had not noticed it happening. He picked it up and unfolded it. 4 words. Welcome back. Keep going. No signature. No name. No indication of who had written it or when, though he knew who had written it and when, because there was only one person in that diner who could have. Mike stood at the booth and held the piece of paper and looked at those 4 words for a long moment. Welcome back. Keep going. Not you're going to be great. Not I believe in you. Not the things people say to famous men who have been through famous troubles because they are fans of the famous man and want him to return to being the version of himself they are fans of. Just, welcome back. Which acknowledged where he had been. And, keep going. Which acknowledged that what was ahead was not a return to something but a continuation of something, a going forward rather than a going back, which was a distinction that almost nobody in his life at that point was making, because almost everyone wanted the old version, and the old version required going back. 4 words on a torn piece of order pad from a woman who had spent an hour bringing him coffee and eggs and leaving him alone, and had apparently been paying attention the whole time. Mike folded the paper and put it in his jacket pocket. He walked to the counter. The waitress was at the far end, wiping something down, her back to him. "Thank you," Mike said. She turned, looked at him. "Anytime," she said, and went back to wiping the counter. Mike walked out of the diner into the 4 a.m. Manhattan street, got into his car, sat for a moment, then started driving. He kept the piece of paper, not in a drawer or a box or anywhere that required intention, just in the jacket pocket, and then eventually in the small collection of objects that accumulate in the places people keep things they are not ready to decide about yet. A piece of paper with 4 words on it from a woman whose name he never knew and whose face he would not have been able to describe in detail 6 months later. "Welcome back. Keep going." He thought about those 4 words at specific moments over the following years. Before fights, sometimes. After losses, more often. In the particular late-night hours when the career was going well on the outside and the inside was more complicated. In the moments that the public version of Mike Tyson and the private version of Mike Tyson were furthest apart, which was not always when you would expect. The woman who wrote those words never knew he kept them. She did not know because he never went back to that diner, not out of avoidance, but out of the particular superstition that some things are completed and going back to them risks losing what they meant. She had given him something by treating him like a person instead of a symbol, and the something she gave him was the recognition that he was, in fact, a person, and that persons coming back from hard things are welcomed back and told to keep going, which is different from being celebrated for having survived and different from being expected to perform recovery for an audience. She just wrote it down and put it under his cup and went back to wiping the counter. That is what happened the night Mike Tyson sat alone in a diner at 3 a.m., and a waitress who recognized him said nothing. She said nothing for an hour, and then she said 4 words, and those 4 words, on a torn piece of order pad, carried more than most of what was said to him in the 4 months before and the years that followed. "Welcome back. Keep going."